Okay, chapter 17, The West, Exploiting an Empire. With the end of the Civil War, Manifest Destiny again really became everybody's focus. Yeah, in the South, you got a lot of Reconstruction efforts still going on and underway, and Jim Crow is certainly being instilled, and there's going to be significant problems that come as a result of that. But for Americans not directly in Southern states, really it starts becoming about the West. As the masses moved west, new states began to develop. You get Colorado, Washington, Montana, the Dakotas, Wyoming, Utah. All of these will take shape and begin the process of transitioning from a territory into a state. Just like in the American system set up by Henry Clay 60 years earlier, though, this move west would be, in fact, again, the source of raw materials, and a government supported infrastructure is going to bring the products east to factories, who are then going to use immigrant laborers to manufacture the goods to sell, both home and abroad. It's really going to also try and help rebuild some of the South. Now, as we moved west, we would have we're going to end up trampling on the rights of an awful lot of people. Native Americans living there, certainly. We're going to trample all over them and their rights. Mexicans in the South, Chinese who are going to come help us build this empire, the railroads that we're going to need to connect everything. We're going to ruin their rights as well. And it's just kind of how things end up going. Now, by the 1890s, as you can see here on this map, things are growing. If you look at that down in the corner, one dot equals 10,000 people. Now we've spread west. We are to the Mississippi at this point in time, and there's certain dots kind of starting to get scattered around there, most specifically in the west, out in San Francisco. But we're moving, we're spreading, and things are starting to happen. Lands west of the Mississippi River had transformed from the wilderness, similar to what Lewis and Clark had found, to a place like you can see here, where cities are developing, and agriculture is reshaping the West. Railroad tracks are connecting huge areas of the West to each other and then to the East Coast. And at this point in time, especially kind of out in the Great Plains region of the United States, and that's what I mean by the Great Plains right there, you're actually starting to get the first ghost towns. As people who had moved out there decade, 2 decades before had already given up on that land, which was really good and there was nothing wrong with it, to move further west, to take advantage of greater opportunities that were even further west. And so shortly after the Civil War in the 1870s, 1880s, as people were making their way, they're going past ghost towns because there's so much out there that everybody's trying to take advantage of it. Now, as people move west, what they found in the Great Plains region it looks pretty much like this: really, really flat grasslands. You're going to get searing heat in the summer and absolutely bone-chilling winds come ripping through there in the winter. The temperature variations are just enormous. There's also sparse water. That's what you see out there. There's rivers, and the settlers tended to stick really close to the rivers because you had to. And also somewhere around out here, there's going to be around 15 million buffalo just living. It's a perfect place for buffalo. They can run all day. There's lots to eat. They know where the rivers are. They're going to stay close enough to them. Just miles and miles and miles of open space. And living on this space are going to be hundreds of tribes of North Americans. Now, like we talked about back in September, depending on where they're living, each tribe is going to develop differently based on the unique needs it's going to need for its survival. Plains Indians, which is really what our focus is right now, they're nomadic. And they're going to develop a really mobile life based largely on the need to find water and to keep up with the buffalo herds. But it's these tribes that are really going to run into the first onrush of settlers because of the wide open lands that they happen to be living on is perfect for moving those wagons across to the west. Now, and so tribes like these are really going to face the first real onslaught of settlers coming in and infringing on their lands and trying to take their space. Now, before the Civil War, most Americans used the land in the West. Really, it's just a massive reservation. It's a kind of a good way to take a look at it. All the tribes they were sent over there. They're on that side of the Mississippi, and then just kind of leave them there. And as a matter of fact, the U.S. government actually called everything west of the Mississippi until you get to California or Texas, a specific place like that. They just called it all Indian country. And that's what it was referred to in official documents and on official maps. But then they found gold in California in 1848. And with that, people really began pushing west. What you see here in 1860, this is 12 years after gold is found in California, and all the red lines are railroad developments, and you can start to see where they're starting to push the railroad. But like I said, California, they found gold in California, which makes it important, which means they got to get out there. And so by 1870, you got this. Okay, you've got the Transcontinental Railroad cutting through Nebraska, Wyoming, Utah, Nevada, all the way to California as we begin to connect all these things. 10 years after that, you can see even more railroads making their way in through the west, as now there's a southern spur that cuts down, and you can get up into Montana. You can make your way around even more. By 1890, that's it. I mean, we're connected. Even the railroads coming into Washington, it actually dropped people off right in downtown Tacoma. A Union Station right there across from the University of Washington is where that railroad is headed right there. And as you look at this, what you can see is really everything's connected. Let's go back and take a quick look at these again, and you can kind of watch the growth. And it just kind of really just goes. But this rush and this push west means that there's really a lot of Americans looking to claim farms and really claim specific spots of land. And that kind of creates a problem. It means that you're going to have to legally recognize certain areas of land for ownership. This spot is mine. From this rock to this tree, that's mine. And outside of that line is yours. And so using the West is one massive reservation that you could just throw all the tribes on and kind of forget about them for a while, like Andrew Jackson kind of wanted to do. It really kind of changes because now settlers are coming in and taking bits and pieces of that land for themselves. And if settlers are going to come in and take bits and pieces of that land for themselves, it means the Native Americans can't use it anymore. And if the Native Americans can't use it anymore, then it just can't be one giant reservation. Something's going to have to change. And the United States government was more than willing to step in and see to that. What the government's going to do, they're going to show up and break these areas of land, this massive area, into smaller reservations. And then the government will be assigning the land to certain tribes. And then they will begin the process of negotiating, specific ways in which to then take that land from them. So first of all, instead of just leaving the West for all the tribes, the U.S. government divides it up. This tribe is assigned here. This tribe is assigned there. That tribe is assigned there. We're going to sell a whole bunch of land in between. And then it's about, once you've got them broken up, it's about trying to take them and figure out how you can sell more of their land. This is really unnatural. The tribes were used to simply moving across the land as needed. You got these Great Plains tribes. They follow the herd. That's where they live. That's where they go, where the herd goes. But now they're supposed to, regardless as to where the herd goes, they're supposed to stay on an assigned area. And instead of being hunter-gatherers who follow the herd and to live off the herd and that, now they're just supposed to all of a sudden take up farming because farming had been successful for us and our culture and our ways of doing things. And it was much more convenient for us if they would, in fact, stay in one spot and farm the land rather than following the herds as they've done for millennia. And so part of the reservation is trying to get them to stay in a spot and then assign them a new way of living, farming, and then changing the culture of those tribes to adapt to a concept of private property because that made a lot of sense to us. And there's going to be a lot of troubles that coming out of that. Now, while all these attempts are made to keep the tribe on the land, you've still got, people showing up and continuing to move west onto these lands and take some of this area and file claims with the government for certain pieces of land, either sometimes on tribal land, sometimes just nearby it, but either way, showing up and laying claim to personal property. And then if a problem breaks up, expecting the United States military to show up and protect them whenever there are some of these issues. And you're going to get a lot of small wars and a lot of battles that are fought over these disagreements as people are showing up. And again, the concept of private ownership in the West is the more it starts to get implemented, the more problems that simply start coming from that. Now, then things get worse. In 1859, gold gets found in Colorado. And that, again, is going to spark huge numbers of miners coming out to the West to get land. But now this land is even more valuable than farmland because now the land's got gold on it, which increases the value. And if it increases the value, it kind of increases everything that's going on out there. The land the gold is on is going to belong to two specific tribes, the Cheyenne and the Arapaho. Fighting, of course, is going to break out with these tribes and miners. And then in 1869, in this land that we're talking about, which is specifically there, fighting breaks out. And a war will happen, and it will be tough, and it will be nasty, and there'll be lots of violence that are certainly going to happen. But then the tribe is going to get tired of it. And the tribe is going to sue for peace in 1864, not 1869. The tribe will ask for terms for peace. They're done. They're going to give it up. Certain that the fighting is over, the leaders of the tribes are going to lead their people, 700 men, women, and children, out of the mountains into the banks of the Sand Creek, right where the thumbtack is, and it's going to be a lot easier for them to live. They're not living up in the mountains of Colorado. Early one morning, while the tribe is along the sands of the Sand Creek, believing that the war is over, Colonel John Chivington will lead his men down to the banks and attack the tribes. Just sitting there, living in peace, assuming the fighting is over, Chivington leads his men on an out-and-out attack, and they simply massacre the tribe that is there. The tribesmen will try to surrender, and Chivington and his men will just continue the attack, continuing pouring it on bullets and swords and everything that they can find, just going up and down, massacring 700 men, women, and children. Eventually, it's right there. That's where it is, and it becomes known as the Sand Creek. This thing right here, they call it the battleground, but calling it a battle assumes that there are two sides actively involved in it. It was truly a massacre. And the Sand Creek Massacre really kind of sends a message to the Native Americans that this is what the U.S. government is truly capable of, that it doesn't really matter if you want to fight, we want the land, and we're going to come take it. But the thing is after the massacre, well, there's no more tribe in that area. And now it's easier for the gold miners to come in and really start taking advantage of the gold. So the mining starts up and the mining continues. There were some survivors of the massacre, and they were forced to accept land really far away. And really, they were hauled up and moved across Colorado by foot. You got to go here because there's no gold here. And so that's what ended up happening. Before long, other tribes really kind of began to fight back, to see the writing on the wall and see what needed to be done. The federal government had announced plans to connect various mining towns in Montana with what's called the Bozeman Trail. And you could see it here. It comes up through the Dakotas into Montana. And they began the work of building the Bozeman Trail. The problem was it was going to go through various Sioux hunting grounds. And this is going to bring large numbers of settlers onto Sioux lands that they had a treaty for, that they had the rights to. But the Bozeman Trail was going to be able to get people to Virginia City, which is a growing, thriving community and kind of big with the mining territory, with the mining industry. And it was going to be, a great opportunity for settlers to move out there. So, well, the trail's getting built, making it easier for more and more settlers. Well, the Sioux can realize that the more people that are coming out there, it's going to work less and less well for them. And so the Sioux are going to act to defend the land that they have negotiated with the United States government to set aside that is their land. The Sioux are going to act to defend it. The treaty that the Sioux held, a term that you might see again and again, it was a common wording for the length of the terms that the tribe would be able to hold the land, would be as long as grass grows and the waters run. And so something to keep your eye on when you're taking the test to look for that. It's a treaty. for land. And this treaty that gave them the land for as long as the grasses grow and the waters run, give them the right to full property rights. It's theirs. They own it. But the military will move in and fight the Sioux. As soon as the Sioux start defending the land from the building of the trail, the military comes in, and things get out of hand. With these two guys right here, this is on the left, you have Chief Spotted Tail, and he is the chief of the Sioux. And on the right, you have Captain William Fetterman. Spotted Tail will take a column of U.S. troops led by Fetterman and trick them into going deep into the Montana countryside, deep into the woods. When he gets them at the spot that he wants it in, he turns it around and massacres Fetterman and all his people, all his soldiers that are there. As Spotted Tail is defending his lands. This quickly becomes known as the Fetterman Massacre. But when you take the Fetterman Massacre, in which Spotted Tail slaughtered these soldiers, and you take the Sand Creek Massacre, in which soldiers had slaughtered the tribes, it really starts a big debate along the East Coast about Native American politics and really what should be done, as clearly fighting is getting out of control. Some people are going to want to reform our whole nation's policies towards the tribe, taking really humanitarian lines, looking to create, educate, and civilize lines, kind of along the same lines as the abolition movement. But many felt that the natives are just savages. And because they're savages, they're unable to learn any new ways. And really the only thing that they're going to understand is force, and treating them and with direct force and direct consequences for not following the guidelines that are established for them. Really, it's kind of similar to some of the arguments again with African Americans in slavery. Can they understand a peaceful way of life? Can they understand our way of doing things, or do we simply have to take them on and control them for their own good? A lot of those same debates that we went over with slaves. Now, eventually, the peace advocates are going to win the debate, and in no small part. It's because it's so soon after the Civil War, and people really weren't interested in going back to another huge war again. The losses from the Civil War had been so much, so maybe we should try a peaceful way to doing it. It's certainly not like everybody's, celebrating cultural diversity. Working with them might just be a lot easier and a lot less expensive. So people kind of do that. Now, this is great news for the tribes, because now they don't have to deal with the U.S. Army coming rolling in after them and shooting the place up. But the problem was the people that are now in charge of the new policies of peace with the Native Americans are going to feel that the best plan, again, is to place the tribes on even smaller reservations, because then they can control them even more, they can support them even more, and they can really kind of influence their lives and get them to adapt onto a more American kind of way of doing things. The idea is to civilize them, to break them free from their native cultures and traditional ways. And then things get worse because the government shows back up. The government will choose really two areas to put all the Plains tribes, and that's the land that they're going to be assigned. They're going to move 54,000 Native Americans from the Plains up to the far reaches of North Dakota, almost on top of the Canadian border. And they got to walk the whole way. Then they're going to take another 86,000 and move them way out to Oklahoma, from Colorado to Oklahoma on foot. Pack up your stuff and head on over, because this is the place that we've decided to put you. And really, both areas were, we thought, useless, terrible for farming, terrible for much of anything. We knew we couldn't sell it for very much, and the settlers wouldn't want it. So perfect place to put the Native Americans. Now, these changes didn't go well at all with the Native Americans. They saw them for exactly what they were: blatant land grabs that denied to them land rights, which they had been genuinely granted earlier by the U.S. government. And the only reason that this was happening was because the land they were on was proving to be valuable. Take the Sand Creek Massacre. There's a gold mine there. Take the Fetterman, if you want to call it the Fetterman Massacre, with Spotted Tail and his attack. The reason they're building that tribe is the land, or the trails, the land is valuable. Where land was valuable if there was Native Americans, and the Native Americans were about to lose. And tensions continue to rise because the Native Americans don't like it. It's obvious what's happening, and they're not necessarily going without, without problems. It's all sorts of things are kind of popping up. This is trouble. This is stress. Things are not good. And things continued to kind of bubble up and boil all over again. It culminated in 1875 with this guy right here, Colonel Custer. He had been a hero in the Civil War. He had fought bravely at the Battle of Gettysburg and a couple of other places, and had done good work in the war. As a cavalry officer, stayed in the Army after the war, went out west, and began the process of trying to control the Native Americans. Well, they ended up in the Black Hills regions of South Dakota. They discovered gold. And as soon as they discovered gold, things get interesting. So the land is now valuable, which means that the tribes that are sitting on top of it now have problems. And those tribes wanted the Black Hills. They liked them. They considered the land sacred. And they definitely were intent on keeping it. And Custer goes rolling in the area to do something about that. He's there. He's looking for samples of gold. He's looking for evidence of gold in the mountains. And he's definitely there to protect the rights of miners in the Black Hills, which is land that was deemed to the Sioux tribe, but he's there to protect the rights of the miners that are on this land. He ends up just opening up an attack on what he thought was a really small band of Sioux right there at the Little Bighorn battlefield. It turns out, however, it's a massive number of Sioux. And Custer and his 265 men quickly found themselves fighting over 2,000 Sioux warriors. The 2,000 warriors, that's just the males who are the warriors who are fighting them. There's women out there too. Custer simply just completely overestimated or underestimated everything that he was up against. And the Battle of Little Bighorn comes to be known as what's called Custer's Last Stand. And here's an incredibly biased, brave picture of General Custer there bravely standing his ground as the Sioux close in on him. It was a massacre, and it was a massacre started by Custer. He was in the area. He was defending the rights of people who shouldn't have been on that land, and he started an attack on a group of peaceful tribesmen who were just minding their own business on land that they were legally allowed to be on. And then the tribe simply came in. They attacked him, and they got him trapped up on Little Bighorn, and they circled around him. They picked him apart, and that was the end of that. The issue, though, with Custer's Last Stand, as it was known at the time, today it's known as the Battle of Little Bighorn, is word of it got back, and Americans lost their minds. That the idea that these Native Americans could come up and slaughter brave Colonel Custer like that as he's out there defending the rights of good, hardworking Americans, however you want to look at it, really got things bad. And it really kind of changed the political debate and the political tone at the time, that instead of trying to help the Native Americans, it's back to force them on reservations, grind them up, push them down. Enough is enough. Now it's about revenge against the Native Americans. And with that, the military turns their attention to the tribes, and a series of war begins where tribe after tribe is just defeated. Members of the tribes are killed, more and more land is taken, and more rights are stripped away. Because of Little Bighorn, we struck back. Now, once the numbers of the tribes were down and they were low on people, the government comes back into play, and we're ready to go again. Policies start being put in place again, placing them again on smaller, more segregated reservations. And really what they're going to do is kind of changes. Leaving them alone on the reservations wasn't working. Now it's about a fundamental change to their entire culture. We need to fundamentally change what it means to be a person living on the plains, and the ways of the Native Americans. That's got to stop. They got to become farmers. They got to take on American lives. They got to Americanize. The idea is to go in and strip away their culture and replace it with a real American sense of what's that. The powers of the chiefs and tribal organizations is completely weakened. And this gives the tribes even less ability to stand up to anybody coming in to trying to, manipulate their land or whatever it is that they're trying to do. Groups will then go west and set up schools really to Americanize youth. And this is a famous picture that kind of shows the goal. It's the same person in both photographs. It's a before and after picture. And so there he is in his traditional native dress. But then the goal is to make him Western, to make him an American. And the hair would be cut, the clothing would be changed. These schools, the most famous of which was known as the Carlisle Indian School. Entirely possible you see something from the Carlisle Indian School. One of the things they would do is they would change their name. They would lose their native name, their tribal name, and they would have to take on an Americanized name, a biblical name that would come out of the Bible. They would teach them to read and write English. They would forbid them to speak their native tongue. They would forbid any kind of tribal customs, any kind of tribal heritage, anything like that. It's all about making them as American as they can. They're taught farming. They're taught skills of how to repair farming equipment. They had to memorize who the presidents were. They had to, all sorts of things like that. One of the motto of the man who ran the Carlisle Indian School was "Kill the Indian, save the man." And that was really the idea, to drive the Native American out of them and turn them into an American. Kill the Indian, save the man. Then this guy's back. The Dawes Severability Act gets passed. Dawes, D-A-W-E-S, Severability, S-E-V-E-R-A-B-I-L-I-T-Y. The Dawes Severability Act made all tribal land was split from the tribe. Whereas the tribe used to control all the land. Now it was split and it was cut up into plots, and each plot was assigned to a specific member of the tribe. Again, it's about decentralizing the power in the tribe, spreading it out, because then you can divide and conquer. And that's really one of the big goals. And so the tribe no longer owned the land. Every specific Native American owned a certain amount. Each family got 160 acres. Any single adult got 80 acres, and children each got 40 acres. Regardless of the size of the reservation at the time, it was originally founded. So no matter how much, when they were promised the land for as long as the grass grows and the water grows, no matter how big that area was, now the Dawes Severability Act said, okay, well, this is how many Native Americans we have living on that tribe. Each family gets 160 acres. Each single adult gets 80. Each child gets 40. Now, there's going to be land left over. That means that extra land, it's going to be sold. It's going to be sold off to white settlers, regardless of the treaty that says as long as the grass grows and the waters run, you have this land forever. They cut it up. They assign pieces of land to people. This is a big deal. Assign pieces of land to certain individuals, and then everything that was left gets sold off to white settlers. The profits of the sales of this go very specifically back to the schools that were using these schools that were turning people and doing this. There was, again, the schools that were designed to strip the culture away from the Native Americans themselves. So not only did they lose land, they ended up paying for the schools that broke their culture from their children. And so really it was very, very tragic. Now, the Native Americans, they're supposed to be farming the land. And of course, few know how. The land was divided up. So the poorest of the plots were given to tribal members. The rockiest soil, the worst soil, goes to the tribal members. The best land for farming is going to go to the people who can best use the land for farming. Well, those are white settlers. And they're going to come rolling in, and they're going to be buying up all that land. Now, 47 million acres of land was set aside with the Dawes Act. There were 90 million acres that were left over after 160 acres to families, 80 to single adults, and 40 to children. There's 90 million acres left over. The natives got 47 million. All that was sold off to white settlers, and the Native Americans simply lost it. Then offers come in for those 160, 80, or 40 acres as people try and get the natives to sell them that land, even more land. It was good. It was money. It was cash on the barrelhead. They owned it, but then they got nothing. There's nothing left. And for people without a concept of private property, the concept of coming and losing your property by selling it on a piece of paper, it was really foreign. And a lot of Native Americans took the money and then realized too late that they had nothing. you sold it. You have the money. That's it. You're on your own. And it was really bad. The final blow to the tribes came when the settlers moving west dang near exterminated the 15 million buffalo that are living out there. Settlers and the army knew that the key to breaking the tribes is just breaking the buffaloes, getting rid of them. If there's no buffalo in the area, then the tribes won't have anything to eat, because farming wasn't what they understood. Hunting the buffalo was. And if you got rid of the food source that they understood, they had two choices. Without the buffalo, they could either starve or they could farm. And so people went out of their way to massacre the buffalo. What you see here are men standing by. That is a pile of buffalo skulls. That's exactly what that is. Here you got a close-up. This is just, I cropped that same picture and got up on the top so you can kind of get a scale of it. But when you look at this is what would happen. The idea, again, I mean, if there's no buffalo, then it encourages, then there's no reason for the tribes to stay on the land. More of them are more willing to sell. The more that are willing to sell, the cheaper the price falls because there's more land available. And then they got no rights, they got no land, they got no nothing, they got to move on. Between 1872 and 1874, 2 years, professional hunters slaughtered 3 million buffalo each year. So a total of 6 million buffalo. And a lot of times they were simply shot for their tongues, which was considered the best part to eat because the meat was so tender. So they'd come along, they'd shoot a buffalo, they'd cut out the tongue, that's dinner for the night. They'd quick fry it up in a pan. The next day they'd shoot an entire animal again, cut out the tongue, cook it up, that's dinner for that night. The rest of the animal is just left to die and decay on the plains. That they didn't want that. Passengers riding west on the railroad trains just to pass the time just used to sit on the out on the back of the train and shoot buffalo from the back and just blast away at it for something to do. By 1883, the herds were almost gone. The U.S. government wanted to develop a procedure, as a matter of fact, wanted to develop and produce the buffalo nickel, a famous nickel at the time, that on the back, like our nickel has Monticello on the back, they wanted a buffalo. They couldn't find a buffalo out on the plain. They were so hard to find. They had to go to a buffalo that was at the Bronx Zoo in New York City and use that buffalo. That's how few were left out there, that they had to go to one in a zoo in order to find a buffalo to put on a nickel commemorating the Wild West and the massive herds of buffalo that had been out there. And of course, it had exactly the impact that people wanted. By 1900, this is the chart of Native American populations. There were somewhere around, 600,000 Native Americans on the day Christopher Columbus showed up. By 1800, that number had absolutely dropped. Oh, wait a minute. My numbers here are wrong, ladies and gentlemen. I'm real happy about that. Christopher Columbus showed up. There's actually around 5 million, not 600,000, 5 million Native Americans. In 1800, there's about 600,000. So I'm sorry about that. So 5 million when Columbus gets there, 600,000 in 1800. By 1900, 250,000. So I apologize for that. I thought I caught all those mistakes, and this one got me. Now, helping people move west and take advantage of all this great land and opportunities out there, that becomes the job of the government. The Homestead Act gets backed, and it's long, but it's important because, again, it's about getting people out to the west to settle this land and take advantage of it, which makes the Homestead Act really important. It's also important because Lincoln did it, and it's a significant thing that Lincoln did that wasn't directly attached to the war, which kind of makes it pretty ripe for a question. After the Homestead Act makes it easier for people to come out there, you also have the Timber Culture Act. And here is another one. Planting trees in treeless areas of the West. Kind of makes it hard to be a Plains Indian if they keep putting trees in the place. They'll just give you more land if you plant more trees. Trees are important though because they break the wind and they make it easier for small plants to do well on the soil. Once you till up the land and you churn up the soil, if you can have a row of trees kind of blocking some of the wind, it makes it easier for your plants to grow. It makes it easier for your crops to come in. Several acts get written to make it easier to move west and take advantage of everything that's out there. There were also Mexican immigrants moving north and usually heading into California, and giving California kind of a real Mexican heritage that's kind of coming up. Don't forget about that. Mining, just switch gears quickly. Mining also becomes a huge reason for people to go west. Gold, silver, and other valuable minerals are discovered. Now, this chart is kind of hard to read. It's a little blurry when you look at the key and you see the mineral resources that are right there. It is a little hard. Gold is pretty easy to spot. Gold is the gold-looking thing. But what you can see is it's a random collection of minerals that are spread throughout the West. They're all getting mined, and they're all valuable, and they're all worth people coming into the area and getting. So it's leading lots and lots of people into the country to go. Huge mining operations grow up in California, Colorado, and Nevada. And these mines, of course, they're going to change the landscape. Towns are going to pop up around them and with services to the miners. Virginia City, Nevada comes up. Leadville, Colorado, Tombstone, Arizona. Places like this begin to pop up. And the gold and labor needed to mine it draw immigrants from all over the place. The opportunity and the jobs. Come on in, you make money. People are coming from China, Mexico, people from South America, France, Germany. The Irish are coming, the English are coming. Everybody's pouring into the West for some of these mining jobs, mostly dangerous work. If the mining isn't enough, then cattle ranchers show up and they start staking out claims, take advantage of all those great wide open spaces. If that land had been perfect for raising buffalo, then it's perfect for raising a cow. And they're going to come in, and one of the first things that a cattle rancher is going to do is fence in the land. He's got to keep his herd in from wandering off like the buffalo had done. So now all of a sudden you got all these fences everywhere and kind of changing the way with the life. Once cattle ranching proves successful, more train tracks get laid down to make it easier to get beef off to the market. So even more people can come out, more opportunity is there, and bringing more people into the West. Now, this is great for the industry, but the Native Americans, it's horrible for them. All it did is just bring in more people, and then you got a lot of small farmers coming in from around the world to stake out a piece of the West for their own. All the great opportunity that's out here, yeah, it's there. Yeah, it's great. And every one of them buys a piece of land out from the Native Americans and makes it theirs and puts a fence around it, and they start defending it and changing the landscape and the lives of the Native Americans. By 1900, the western half of the nation held 30% of its population. In contrast, just 50 years earlier, 1% of the population lived in the West. It had jumped 29% as people are moving out there. And there's another group that's taking advantage of opportunity out in the West and really kind of going out of their way to get there. The freedmen that are leaving the South and getting away from Jim Crow. They're getting out of there because you're all by yourself way out in the West. So why not? It makes sense. They were called exodusters, 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 freedmen looking to get away from the Jim Crow South. Now, to support the farmers living in the West, a group of granges start getting set up. Granges, Granges. And these are social and cultural and educational groups that kind of meet and they kind of become the center of life way out there in the middle of the plains. They become a good place for farmers to gather. They trade ideas. Salesmen will come to the area and pitch new farming ideas and things like that. It also kind of becomes a place to talk about the events of the day, just to go be with other people. It kind of becomes really the center of life out there. And then our last big push in the West actually turns back more towards the center. Oklahoma had been an Indian reservation for an awful long time. And in 1889, the U.S. government gave in to public pressure and finally opened up the last secure Indian reservation in Oklahoma and allowed settlers to move onto the area. On April 22nd, 1889, it would become legal for settlers to cross into formerly Native American lands to Oklahoma and stake out their own piece of America. Regardless of the treaties, it said as long as the grass grows and the waters run. Well, now settlers can come into there. And the Creek and Seminole tribes that had lived in there, who had been there since Andrew Jackson located them there on the Trail of Tears, it was just bad luck for them. As the 22nd approached, nearly 100,000 settlers gathered along the Oklahoma border waiting for the moment they could cross and the land. Finally, at noon on that day, cannon blast sounded, and it gave the signal to cross and take your piece of Oklahoma. It's known as the Oklahoma Land Rush. Settlers called Sooners, Sooners. As a matter of fact, the University of Oklahoma's mascot is the Sooners. It's named right after this movement right here, because you wanted to get to the border soon, so you had the best opportunity to get into Oklahoma. By sunset of that first day, they claimed almost 2 million acres of land that had been promised to the Creek and Seminole, and just made it theirs. And so once again, the tribe simply lost. Now, the West would not be officially settled for some time still, but it really had become obvious as to who was going to possess it and what life was going to be like and how it was going to run. This right here will kind of show you a little bit about what I'm talking about. Land claims by tribes. So that's originally. And then by 1784, you can start to see the green is the Native American space. And bit by bit, as they just continue to lose more land, that's kind of what happened. So there it is. That is chapter 17, the settlement of the West. It is there for you. If you have any questions, please come in and ask me, and I will be very happy to help you out with this. Thank you very much.